Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Paul Clements-Hunt from UNEP Finance Initiative. Welcome to our 2011 Global Roundtable. It comes as part of a series, a tour around the world: 2000 Frankfurt, 2002 Rio de Janeiro, 2003 Tokyo, 2005 United Nations headquarters in New York, 2007 Melbourne, 2009 Cape Town, and now D.C. We hope you're going to have a fabulous couple of days, and we've got a great speaker lineup. The theme for the next 2 days is the tipping point: sustained stability in the next economy, robust discussion, your experience, and a good time as well. That's what we've got planned. Now, let me clear one thing right at the start, where we had our own mini black swan yesterday afternoon, in that Nassim Taleb cannot join us for unforeseen and unexpected reasons. He's very kindly sending 500 copies of his book, The Black Swan, and obviously we have also re-engineered the program to keep the adrenaline flowing. And I have no concerns that by the end of the morning session you'll be engaged and that adrenaline will be flowing. So sit back and we'll now get on with affairs. So for the opening session, I would like to welcome Barbara Krumsiek of Calvert Investments to the stage, the co-chair of UNEP FI, who will make the opening comments. Thank you very much, Barbara.
Good morning, and thank you, Paul. Welcome. I'm greeting you today wearing two hats, although neither one of them appears to be on. I'm the current co-chair of UNEP FI's Global Steering Committee, an honor that I share with my good friend Richard Burritt of Earth Capital Partners. I'm also the CEO of Calvert Investments, a global pioneer in the field of sustainable and responsible investing that I've had the honor to lead since 1997. I'm pleased to welcome you all to Calvert's hometown of Washington, D.C., and for those who have ever pondered, and I did when I considered moving here to lead Calvert, where did the name Calvert come from? It's actually Calvert Street in the district, which is where Calvert's offices were back in the early 80s, late 70s, and the founders looked out the window, saw Calvert, and that's how we got our name. It's that simple. But this is our hometown, and we are very pleased that you all have made the journey here for what I know will be 2 full days of intense thinking on how tomorrow's economy can be a smarter and more resilient one. We look forward to gaining from your perspectives, experience, and expertise. As we start this global roundtable, whose theme is the tipping point, and this theme was selected over a year ago, I want to acknowledge that this has now become a phrase in the headlines. We may be at a tipping point here in the U.S. in many ways. Over the last few weeks, a movement has taken hold, which many of you know as Occupy Wall Street. There are real concerns being raised by this group, and the group is camped out between here and the JW Marriott, the local contingent of this. In this current economic and political climate, it's understandable that many Americans feel that regulatory and fiscal policy has failed to balance the needs of all stakeholders in our economy. What I consider the core concern raised by this movement is that the primary focus and most visible result of fiscal stimulus and economic reform has been to restore financial institutions to their previous levels of profitability and capitalization, and, ironically, executives to their previous levels of compensation. All the attention seems to have gone in this direction, and many feel in the middle class and among the poor that this is a question of fairness. Why are the middle class and poor not receiving the same amount of attention when it comes to restoring their financial health and well-being, their jobs, savings account rates, 401k retirement plan balances, for example? There is the appearance, and perhaps to some extent the reality, that this movement is calling attention to the unbalanced policy focus. So more work needs to be done, and soon. The message that our sustainable finance community is well positioned to deliver is how our network works to build structures and implement sound policies that will balance financial success with a more just society and sustainable economy for all. Indeed, the tipping point that those of us gathered here today and that the members of UNEP FI are striving towards is sustained stability. Over the next 2 days, we hope to establish bridges between these two notions that influence our global financial future, stability and sustainability. While these themes have long coexisted, their agendas have rarely been connected. As the financial community works to restore trust in financial systems, we must together send a strong signal that demonstrates our collective capacity across investment management, insurance, and banking to make a meaningful impact on the pressing challenges that face the world today. The idea that finance can help build a strong, sustainable future is at the heart of the company I lead, Calvert Investments. For over 30 years, we've used our role as investors to promote a more equitable economy, more just society, and a more sustainable world. Through UNEP FI, over 200 financial institutions have made a commitment to work with the United Nations to demonstrate the linkages between finance and sustainability. And next year, looking ahead, is a significant one for UNEP FI. We are hard at work preparing for the June 2012 UN Conference on Sustainable Development, otherwise known as Rio +20. This event will mark the 20th anniversary of the Earth Summit, which was first held in Rio in 1992. That landmark summit led to the creation of several core environmental policy frameworks, including the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, Agenda 21, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Forest Principles, and the Framework Convention on Climate Change. In fact, UNEP FI was launched in the lead-up to the 1992 Rio Summit with a mission to identify and promote environmental and sustainable practices at all levels within financial institutions. UNEP FI was the first dedicated finance and sustainability network and remains the only such network to bring together members from across the financial sectors, banking, insurance, and investment, from regions around the world. UNEP FI has worked to change the face of finance through landmark reports focused on ESG materiality, the fiduciary and legal dimensions of ESG investing, and through innovative industry partnerships, such as the launch of the Principles for Responsible Investment in partnership with the UN Global Compact, and the upcoming launch, which we are very excited about, of the Principles for Sustainable Insurance. Even with all that UNEP FI has accomplished, we certainly recognize there is yet even more to be done. The Rio +20 conference and UNEP FI's 20th anniversary offer our members a perfect opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to sustainable finance and demonstrate that we understand and welcome the role that we must play in building a stable economy. We plan to use UNEP FI's position as the only finance and sustainability network directly embedded in the UN system to pursue the policy and regulatory changes necessary for a transition to sustainable finance. It is not enough to simply invest in the best companies, which we strive to do as investors at Calvert. We also need to push for public policy and global standards that create an environment which allows the best companies to succeed. We recognize that the broad environmental challenges, from resource scarcity to climate change, present both risks and opportunities which require investors to advocate for policy frameworks which help facilitate the flow of capital to energy and climate solutions. Calvert, and indeed many of us personally, have been vocal in our support for our next speaker, and the real highlight of our opening plenary, with all due respect to all the speakers, because she understands this need for strong and effective public policy in the environmental arena. Lisa Jackson, Administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. In our view, Lisa Jackson and the EPA are strong allies in our goal to move towards a sustainable green economy. And their role is so terribly important in this particular climate. The financial sector has valued the leadership and vision Lisa has shown, because it is not only the environment that benefits from effective environmental regulations, but also investors. And certainly, as we will more and more speak in these terms, also those we serve, our shareholders and the public at large, benefit from strong the work that we do in finance and also the strong environmental frameworks in which we operate. Since being named President Obama's cabinet member in charge of environmental protection, EPA Administrator Lisa P. Jackson has been named one of Newsweek's most important people in 2010, featured in Time magazine's 2010 and 2011 lists of the 100 most influential people in the world, listed in Essence magazine's 40 Women Who Have Influenced the World, and profiled in O magazine for her work to protect our nation's air, water, and land from pollution that threatens human health. I could go on and on. It's an extraordinary bio, but I know you join me in wanting very much to hear from Administrator Jackson. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Jackson.
Wow, that's such a nice introduction. I could stay here all day. It's nicer than Capitol Hill sometimes these days. Well, thank you, Barbara. It's really good to be here. Thank you to Calvert for kicking us off this morning. I am usually blamed for the weather, but this morning I take no fault for it. But I think we're working on tomorrow, so stick around. And to Paul Clements-Hunt, thank you for having me, and thank you for hosting us here. And in absentia, I have to always give a shout out to my dear friend and colleague, Achim Steiner, for the remarkable work he's doing to continue to move these issues forward in a way that's very positive for people around the world and also for their economies. So thanks to him and to UNEP for bringing us together and inviting me to be here. I'm glad to be working with all of you after all the steps we took to strengthen EPA's connections with UNEP when I was in Nairobi just this past February. And I'm also glad to be here with our partners in the private sector. It's your presence here and your work with UNEP's finance initiative that are essential to facing the historic economic and environmental challenges that are ahead of all of us. Now, everyone has heard for years that there is an inevitable tension between people's health and the environment. But I think everyone in this room, of all rooms in Washington, know that this is a false perception. We do not have to choose between economic returns and environmental protection. A stronger economy is a greener economy. A greener economy is a stronger economy. In fact, we have already identified ways in which we are not only similar, but that we are better off by working together. You know, the most basic similarity between the finance industry and environmentalists is that we both have made risk assessment critical to our decision making. When we speak about risk assessment at EPA, we talk about lives and parts per billions and the likelihood of a chemical reaching an unintended recipient. But today, as seen in many of your investment strategies, many of those risks, environmental and financial, overlap. Drought, desertification, biodiversity loss, flooding, and other extreme weather phenomena are among the most likely, the most costly, and the most potentially severe risks listed in a recent report. And that wasn't a report produced by a government agency or EPA or an eco-advocacy group. It came from the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report that surveyed businesses and investors. Businesses and their financial backers have experienced the unfortunate downside of this and other environmental threats. In 2008 alone, UNEP estimated that environmental harm resulting from human activity caused $6.6 trillion in damages, much of that to assets held or insured by the financial services sector. Naturally, businesses and investors want to reduce these risks, and to do so, we need to continue to work together. By working to motivate and expand investment in environmental technologies, investments in cleaner production, investments in green infrastructure, we can improve your bottom line while protecting the environment and building healthier communities. Know that we know that in order for you to do business, you need clarity and predictability. So we are working to meet those needs by addressing greenhouse gases using the same tools within the Clean Air Act that we've used successfully for decades on other types of pollution. We know that you need baseline investment in research and development, which is why we're collecting accurate and timely greenhouse gas data. And as we have for more than a decade, we're utilizing markets to advance energy efficiency and clean energy. through programs like Energy Star or the Green Power Partnership, the Combined Heat and Power Partnership, or Methanes to Markets, the Global Methane Initiative. We've also dedicated more than $90 billion to job-creating clean energy projects. That included $29 billion for energy efficiency, $21 billion for renewable energy generation, $10 billion for grid modernization, and $6 billion for advanced vehicles and fuels under the Recovery Act. When supplemented by private capital, that money is supporting more than $150 million billion in clean energy projects. And beyond that, we're developing common sense strategies that encourage investments in energy efficiency and updated technologies, strategies that are clear and flexible and cost effective, and strategies that rely on input from the citizens and industry, the affected stakeholders, and other entities. All of these start us on the road to a prosperous green economy. But you're here today because you know we need to go further to meet the considerable challenges ahead of us today, right now. So EPA will join you. We've embarked on an effort to look beyond traditional risk-based framework, which has defined our work, and fix our sights on sustainability. We want to make sure that we see the picture you see, the big picture, and that we aren't addressing only one environmental issue at a time or addressing it in a way that neglects opportunities that can cross silos within the environmental regulatory field. We fixed our view on sustainability. And while we build on reactive efforts that minimize risk, there will always be a need for us to react to the environmental crisis or incident of the day. Every day, the news is full of stories of EPA or state governments reacting. It's really important that we move towards being as proactive as we can so that we continue to follow your focus on innovation, on sustainability, and that most important goal, job creation. So I'm happy to see that the global community has placed a priority on this sustainable approach and made it the focus of Rio 2012. I'm also glad that UNEP FI has engaged more than 200 financial institutions and a broad group of global finance sector stakeholders to promote awareness about the connections between sustainability and financial performance. I was very pleased to travel to Brazil this past August to help launch a joint initiative on urban sustainability. That partnership is designed to serve as a model for green economies in Brazil and the U.S., and maybe around the world, by enabling positive market conditions and supporting investments in urban sustainability. Our work will eventually result in the first edition of what we are informally calling a green economy cookbook, with recipes that work on the ground and key financing ingredients and policy menus for short and long-term investments in urban sustainability. We're also continuing our work with the financial community to help ensure the global availability of capital for environmental protection and improving infrastructure, and to ensure that efforts to meet our environmental challenges coincide with sustainable economic growth. We will continue to work alongside other federal agencies to assess potential environmental impacts of multilateral development projects. And we plan to further boost sustainable development and good environmental stewardship as we have through the International Finance Corporation Sustainability Framework. So we look forward to having a similar role in the U.S. government's engagement with the World Bank on its safeguard policies, which are set to be revised in a process that begins this year. In short, we know that our future will be built on innovations. And we know that those innovations coming from the private sector will need the support of robust investment, the idea and the energy of entrepreneurs, and a marketplace for commercialization of new clean products. We know that EPA's role as a leading regulator and environmental voice can help give market and voice to the need for those products and those investments. So I'm glad to see so many of you here this morning dedicated to talking about this important effort and stepping up in recognition of the shared interests we have for our economic and environmental future. I look forward to working with you, and I wish you dry weather and a wonderful conference. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, we know Lisa Jackson's responsibilities and burdens, so please put your hands together again. She has an incredible schedule ahead of COP17 in Durban, so let's show our appreciation once more. Our next speaker is Khalida Bouzar, who will make comments for the United Nations Environment Programme on behalf of our executive, Akam Steiner, who had been called away for negotiations in Cartagena, which I think many of you are aware of and following. So, Khalida, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates. It's a challenge for me to speak after Lisa Jackson. I hope I will be as inspiring as she was. The 2011 UNEP Finance Initiative Global Roundtable comes at a crucial time in international policy making. Next month, as an example, the formal negotiations under the UN Climate Convention resume in Durban, South Africa, after getting back on track in Cancun, Mexico last year. In around 8 months, as Mrs. Jackson was mentioning, governments, business, and civil society meet in Rio, 20 years after the Earth Summit that established many of the key instruments and landmark treaties that have set the course for contemporary sustainable development. The role of banks, insurers and investors and the capital market will play a fundamental role in whether the world can deliver a transition to a low-carbon, resource-efficient green economy, one that grows economies and generates decent green jobs and other social outcomes, but in a way that keeps humanity's footprint within the ecological boundaries of our planet. Our two-day global gathering in Washington here affords certainly an opportunity to shape and to sharpen the financial services sector's contribution to Durban as well as to Rio +20, a review of what has worked and what needs to be done to focus markets and investors on the sustainable management of the planet as an antidote to the mining operation of the Earth life support systems that has characterized so much of the intervening years. It is worth noting that in 2 weeks' time, sometime in this world, the 7 billion person will be born, a rise in the global population of 26% since the Rio Summit in 1992. The UNEP FI partnership was conceived to support efforts at the original Rio Earth Summit and has pioneered the role of finance, investment, insurance, as well as capital markets in a more intelligent management of the environment and the promotion of sustainable development. While we are approaching the 20th anniversary of the Earth Summit, we think that your gathering is offering an opportunity to reflect deeply over a series of key questions. How have financial services contributed to social and environmental issues since the UN partnered with the sector through UNEP FI 20 years ago? In a post-financial crash environment, are our financial and capital markets fit for purpose to deliver sustainable development for all and to generate a green economy? If not, what must change? Does the capital market system we have collectively engineered have the capacity to meet the aspirations that we set for ourselves in the 1992 Earth Summit and the ability to implement sustainable development as part of the cooperative outcome of Rio +20? I'm sure that you will agree with us by saying that Rio +20 needs to be a defining moment to answer these questions, and by the same token, re-engage global efforts to accelerate and scale up the mobilization of private sector in the private capital into the new ideas, entrepreneurs, technologies, and companies that will equip a planet of 9 billion people to live sustainably in the 21st century and beyond. Rio +20 also needs to reflect a world that is geopolitically, economically, socially, and environmentally very different from that of 1992. Looking back at our accomplishments so far, we should still feel proud and be proud of the progress that we have achieved so far, but also be critical of the uneven nature of the work achieved so far. Looking at the sustainable finance balance sheet of the past 20 years, we see that leading initiatives such as UNEP FI, the Equator Principles, and the Principles for Responsible Investment, incubated and launched by UNEP FI, among others, have significantly achieved to advance the thinking and approaches to financial sustainability. We can safely say that these have been pathfinders. Meanwhile, investments are flowing into the green economy. Let me mention as an example, and this goes with what Mrs. Jackson was saying, the Sustainable Energy Finance Initiative, in which UNEP is a partner, has estimated that new investment in renewable energies were $211 billion in 2010. This is a clear indicator of interest. But on the other side of the balance sheet, we still see much of mainstream finance and capital flows going to carbon-intensive, to resource-inefficient industries. Some of the behavior within financial services that contributed to subprime, to sovereign debt crisis and ongoing market volatility are clearly not in the spirit of people, planet, and profit. The Occupy Wall Street protest, mirrored in London, in Korea, in Japan, and elsewhere in Europe, over recent days underline a growing mood of disillusion and frustration among ordinary people worldwide over failures of the financial sector that led to the crash 2007-8, but also to the ongoing crisis that many economies are facing today. So again, what needs to be changed and what needs to change? We have seen some positive development, and I would like to mention a few of them. The emergence of integrated reporting to improve transparency and disclosure along the investment chain. The world's largest asset owners, pension funds, sovereign funds, and insurance reserves now waking to their responsibilities around climate change, resource depletion, and threats to our rich ecosystems that underpin all forms of economic and social development. Through work on the green economy, we also see the emergence of an understanding and an analysis of the kind of policy switch and investment needed to fully price and account for our natural capital and reverse environmental degradation. So today, with only a few months to go before Rio 20, we would like to urge the financial community to actively engage with policymakers ahead of the Rio Summit, during the Rio Summit, and beyond it to create a regulatory and forward-looking policy environment that can unleash the funds needed to make a transition to a green economy become a reality. In UNEP, we are justly proud of our partnership along these past 20 years with the financial services and sectors, but we also know that we are only at the very beginning of a long journey. If banks, insurance, and investors in the developed and developing world are to play their full role in evolving sustainability onto a higher and far more decisive level. This transition will happen by default or by design, will happen at the scale and the pace required, or in a sense, a scramble as the cost of resource depletion and of climate change start to challenge the very functioning of economies, first in vulnerable countries, of course, but then perhaps elsewhere or everywhere. It is an exciting moment in history, a time for responsibility and for leadership, but also a time to transform challenges that we are facing today into opportunities. I hope our 2 days here in Washington, D.C. will echo and reflect these central themes and generate the kind of creativity and innovation that can redefine the 21st century to secure a good life for our grandchildren and beyond. Thank you very much.
Khalida, many thanks for your comments. And we've we've heard from our co-chair, we've heard from a national policymaker, and we've had an intergovernmental perspective. The message couldn't be clearer. There are pluses on the balance sheet in terms of sustainable finance and responsible investment. We need to go quicker. We need to go smarter. We need to accelerate. We need to go at scale. And we need to think about where the system isn't working. So there's good and bad. And that's what we're going to pull out over the next 2 days in the breakouts and the various discussions. We now come to a segment whereby representatives of UNEP FI's three main commission sectors, banking, insurance and investment, will address their comments to the plenary. Now, UNEP FI, as we know, goes back 20 years. It is a public-private partnership, and it's that balance which is key. So with that in mind, I am delighted to ask our first representative to the stage for the investment sector view, and that's Mr. Rick Lacaille, who's the Chief Investment Officer of State Street Global Advisors, to present. And State Street have been a huge supporter of UNEP FI over many, many years. So, Mr. Lacaille, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Paul. I wish Lisa was still here because I'm British, so I can take the blame for the weather. But let me get started on the meat of what we should be talking about. I'm Rick Lacaille, Global CIO at State Street Global Advisors. And I'm delighted to be here today in two capacities. One is my capacity as CIO at SSJ, and secondly, as a member of State Street's Executive Committee on Corporate Responsibility. And I want to discuss State Street's long history of involvement in sustainability and my personal point of view on these issues of sustainability and the tipping point. Firstly, I want to acknowledge our affiliation, as Paul mentioned, with industry groups that shaped our thinking and guided best practice at State Street, and especially our strong cooperation with the UNEP FI. We've been a member of that program for 6 years. We've been represented on the Global Steering Committee for the last 4 years. We've chaired the North America Task Force and are proud to be on the Investment Commission along with 60 members. And in addition, our company, in fact our industry, I think has been enriched by the contributions of UNEP FI that we'd like to pay tribute to, and in particular these contributions of developing the PRI and obviously the Freshfields work on fiduciary duty, which I think for many of us perhaps clarify the legality behind these considerations of ESG in many jurisdictions. Now, we know that sustainability is not all about environmental issues. It's about financial structures, debt, sustainable economies. But I'm going to confine my remarks principally to environmental sustainability and the way in which we carry out our operations and the products and services we offer at State Street. And some of the factors that we've seen bring us towards that tipping point of sustainable investing include an increasing recognition among companies that the actual targets of our investment, that sustainability is important to performance. An increasing trend, I think, we're seeing for engagement by shareholders with companies on behalf of their clients. And finally, our role in policy and regulation to foster sustainability. And whilst we found that the financial significance of a single issue or even a subset of those ESG factors varies both cross-sectionally, stock by stock and sector by sector and country by country, and through time, it varies. But we believe that this dynamic is poised to evolve and that we have responded at SSGA accordingly. Now, I think it is imperative, particularly at a time when the reputation of the financial services industry, including asset management, is at a low point, that we stick to our values, and that the essential covenant that we have at SSGA with our clients is that we will introduce investment processes when we have proof, both from a theoretical and an empirical perspective, that they actually work. If you look at the roots of State Street and SSJ in investing, we were early proponents of indexing, when a lot of the industry was perhaps more interested in revenue generation and active management. Why did we do that? Because we were led by research that said this would be a good outcome for our clients, and that proved to be the case. And that's been the guiding light of all our investment activity over many years. It's led us into quant investing, it's led us into value investing, and it leads us into sustainable investing. However, it does give us an obligation to do that research. And I think when we explore these factors in our quant models and our equity models, we find that the situation merits continuing research. The practice of incorporating environmental factors and other factors into our investment decisions has largely been based on a logical argument that a corporation should, all other things being equal, benefit from superior performance if it's well governed and operates in a manner that's environmentally friendly and socially responsible. In practice, we find it difficult to draw out from the data the degree to which good management of these issues is already discounted by investors in the stock price. And I think there's sometimes an assumption that the extra financial factors are not taken into consideration by stock analysts, credit analysts, and others. And I think there's a case to be made that that is true. However, when we look at the data, we find it's unclear. We find that there are patches where there's clear evidence of a link, and we find that other areas are changing rapidly. So our research effort reflects both increasing demand and interest on behalf of our clients for ESG, and our belief that there is an evolutionary relationship between ESG factors and performance of companies and stock prices. It should, however, be recognized that while sustainability and sustainable investing have reached that tipping point, to make further progress will not be easy. And I think just reflecting on one issue of population, the global population issue was referred to earlier, it may reach 9.5 billion by 2050, and the strain on the planet in terms of a growing middle class and their demand for food, water and energy supplies can be seen very clearly in a country like China and other developing countries. And this large-scale move to cities, which on the one hand might be efficient from an environmental perspective in the long run, is a one-time change that obviously creates enormous demands. I think at present the global economy does not seem prepared to cope with these competing pressures of a swelling global population and an increasing scarcity of many commodities, particularly those hydrocarbons on which we have in the past relied. So this paradigm shift, not to be too cliche, to a low-carbon economy must occur in order to ensure that we can continue global economic growth and a sustainable environment. And failure to make those actions will cost more in the long term. But just to point out one of the contradictions and conflicts, one of the things we do is obviously invest for the long term for pensioners so that they can live in retirement and have a successful period of retirement. And one of the issues for them is inflation. And of course now you have this conflict between current consumption of commodities and future consumption by pensioners, as manifested in the debate about financial use or financial investment in commodities. So I think there are many conflicts between the generations and between different of our stakeholders that are complex to reconcile. The financial implications in terms of the absolute value we've hinted at before, $1 trillion a year, these investments are pretty substantial that are required. And I think there are some who find that overwhelming and believe that the capital will not be available to make this transformation. Others anticipate a sort of gold rush in which clean tech intellectual property is transformed into very substantial businesses, mirroring developments perhaps in the software world. And I think it's great news that people are excited about this, but equally, given the history of financial services, we should all be troubled about an environment that can create bubbles, can create mis-selling, and can create the sort of environment where bad things happen. I believe that the capital requirements for mitigating climate change and increasing energy efficiency and adaptation are largely available now. When we look at the existing stock of assets from institutions in pension funds, private individuals, sovereign wealth funds, it's been estimated to be as high as $60 or $70 trillion. And although the savings ratio in emerging markets will decline over time, the absolute income level in those countries will act to counteract that factor. But we do need to be aware of the significant difference between the type of investment we need for changing to a low-carbon world and the capital-light nature of the IT industry. The scale of capital expenditure on energy generation and distribution, water management, low-carbon real estate, so on and so forth, is very substantial. The IEA estimate of the ACT scenario was $17 trillion between now and 2050, over and above baseline investment. And I think although there will be a significant high return, high risk intellectual property component to the investment story, the reality is likely to be more prosaic in nature. Simply put, there will be a lot of engineering, building, manufacturing expenditure and investment, perhaps undertaken by many enterprises that actually already exist. And much of the investment will be in income-generating assets, such as real estate, that have substantially the same economics as the current generation of investments, but with greener characteristics to meet the increasing regulatory and financial constraints. Now, some of these investments in power generation and other areas will require some degree of underpinning or certainty from government regulation as a consequence of a potential gap between the economics of the legacy dirty assets and those in the new world. Assuming that any large gap between the economics of these unconstrained legacy assets and the new ones can be bridged by governments or, in fact, by users, investors, in my view, will fund these assets. The question really is what the mix might be. What the mix might be on two axes. Firstly, the debt-to-equity ratio, and secondly, how much public markets, as opposed to private markets, might play a role. Now, the mix of funding, again, in my view, is likely to be more skewed towards debt for assets created in reasonably mature technologies if we look forward over the next 30 years. And the reason I say that is because of the more certain earnings that these assets, particularly the engineering-type assets, will deliver. And I think in terms of the overwhelming requirement for capital, we should regard that as good news because, frankly, the supply of investor capital seeking income-earning assets may well be rising as funded pension systems continue to mature, and an increasing number of pensioners need to find those long-term, long-duration assets. And although there may be alternatives for raising debt capital, public bond issuance, again, in my view, may be one of the most suitable ways for very large-scale borrowing. And it's not just the state of the banks that pushes us in that direction. I think there are many reasons why that should be a significant part of the mix. And that's one of the reasons, again, joining the dots together, one of the reasons that we at SSGA have become more interested in sustainable investment strategies in fixed income. I think there's often a lot of attention paid to equity. In our view, fixed income is equally interesting because our ability to understand the risks and returns of fixed income instruments in this area will be very significant to us as an asset manager and to our clients in the future. So just finally, to talk about this in a little bit more detail, at State Street, we've developed a number of things in this area of sustainability, and I focus most of my attention on SSGA because I'm CIO of that business. But in fact, in other parts of State Street, we've been investing our own capital in tax-efficient clean energy. We've been enabling our clients in the global services business to understand and see their risks when it comes to environmental risks. And we've also carried out carbon offset trading within our global markets business. Just finally, while sustainable investing in equities, as I mentioned, has been growing for some years and now amounts to trillions of dollars, issuance of green bonds is still relatively new. The World Bank launched the first deal in November 2008, and there are now approximately $12 billion of green bonds outstanding. Much of the infrastructure required to sustain that population will be financed, in my view, by this sort of bond market activity. And given the secular trends of macro de-risking, as I mentioned before, efforts to mitigate climate change, a lot of these things come together in terms of the likelihood of available capital in green bonds, which we believe could reach as much as $1.4 trillion in Europe between 2011 and 2020. And so as another example of what we've been doing, we've been holding a green bond summits both in Boston and London, and today we've launched a new high-quality green bond strategy which allows our investors and our clients to invest directly in fixed income investments that finance sustainable climate solutions. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you for letting me talk and pay tribute to UNEP FI and the work of UNEP FI and our strong support at State Street for all the efforts that have been made. I think I'd just like to finish by one set of concluding remarks about SSGA, which again are personal remarks. I think sometimes the investment cost of change seems overwhelming, but at the same time, some see it as a gold rush, and I think we should be wary of that, given the history of the financial services industry and all the criticism that we've come in for. But if we strip apart the spin and we look at what really underpins what needs to go on in terms of that financing, I think we do need a more certain environment led by our leadership in politicians in order to make those risks understandable for investors. I do believe bonds will play a very critical role, as they historically have done, in financing infrastructure. And finally, I'd leave you with our commitment at SSGA to be led by research, wherever that might lead us, to serve our clients well. Thank you very much again for the invitation.
Rick, thank you very much indeed for those comments, which takes us right into the heart of some of the investment issues. And just a reflection, I think if you were to pick one conversation within UNEP FI and the principles for responsible investment, which has zipped over the last 2 years, it's the reality of doing green fixed income properly at scale and the opportunities that exist there. So thank you for flagging those comments from the investment side. And I would now like to introduce to the stage the banking representative. And as I recall it, I think Bank of America was one of our original founders back in 1992. So it's been a long love affair, I should say. And we're delighted to have you here with us. So I would ask Miss Alexandra Liftman of Bank of America to come to the stage to address comments in the banking context. Thank you very much.
Forgive me all my equipment. Paul asked us to really stay on time, so I'm going to try and stick to my commitment there. Thank you very much, and I want to thank Paul for everything you do and everything that UNEP FI does to support us in this very important work. And I will thank you in advance also for a terrific convening, the discussions that will happen in the context of panels and other opportunities over the next couple of days are probably some of the most important discussions that we will have this year. As Paul mentioned, I am the Global Environmental Executive for Bank of America. I sit on our Environmental Council along with the senior-most leaders of all of our businesses across the bank, and I have oversight of everything the bank does in the environmental space. As Paul also mentioned, we're a really long-standing partner at UNEP FI, and we've served on the Global Steering Committee, so we consider ourselves close partners with this organization. So I don't think I have to give you a state of the state in banking. The short-term challenges that we face have been well explored in the media and, frankly, in the streets. But make no mistake, I agree with everything that Barbara said earlier, and I know my counterparts at all of the big banks do as well, that banks have a responsibility to build a strong and sustainable economy. And as Lisa said earlier, it's good business. Green business is strong business. So across the banking sector, even in this challenging market environment, we have recommitted ourselves in a big way to our sustainable finance activities. There is even greater competition among the banks for deals, particularly in renewable energy and clean tech. So just to cite a few statistics, if we look at venture capital funding, 30% of all venture capital funding today goes to clean tech. That means it rivals software for the #1 position in venture capital funding. As Kalita said earlier, in 2010, according to Bloomberg, $211 billion, or a 30% increase year over year, went into clean energy. And if you look at the critical issue of job growth, while we know job growth itself has been stagnant, particularly here in the United States, but internationally as well, green jobs are outpacing their traditional counterparts by 2 or 2.5 times. So despite all of the near-term challenges, which are not insignificant, and of which there are many, banks are more focused today than ever on the long term and on developing a strong and sustainable economy. At Bank of America, like State Street, we were early leaders in this space, but we have certainly stepped up our commitment over the last few years, and we continue to integrate it across everything that we do. In May of this year, we announced one of the most aggressive greenhouse gas emission reduction programs in the world. By the end of 2015, we will have reduced our emissions through direct activities within our operations by a third over a 10-year period. We've substantially increased our funding in wind, solar, energy efficiency projects, completing more than $6 billion from our 10-year, $20 billion commitment in just the last year and a half. And last month, when we talk about our employees and engaging our employees around the world, we signed up our 1,000th employee ambassador in the environmental space. And increasingly, we're being recognized for these efforts, and we're really pleased by that. We topped the CDP rankings as the #1 global bank in both carbon performance and carbon disclosure. Last week, The Banker named Bank of America Merrill Lynch the most innovative investment bank for climate change and sustainability. And on Monday, just this last Monday, the Newsweek rankings that we pay so much attention to here in the U.S., and all of you global folks now get to feel our pain with the global rankings. We were ranked #2 of U.S. banks and #3 globally. And I should probably take this opportunity to recognize and congratulate Sean Miller at Citi for their #1 ranking and Mark Fulton at Deutsche Bank for their #2, and of course Tony at Munich Re for their #1 ranking overall in the global rankings. We all know that rankings, as I said, often are the bane of our existence, but one of the things that they indicate is that people still care. You know, the Daily Beast took over Newsweek, continued to put out the rankings because there's still an appetite for that type of information, and that makes me optimistic. So this is all terrific, and we, as I said, are really pleased to be able to take this type of a leadership position, but we strongly believe that we can do more. We should do more, we should do it faster, and we should do it smarter, to quote Paul. And really, all of our efforts are just scratching the surface. In thinking about coming here today and the discussion that we were going to have over the next couple of days, I've been thinking a lot about Steve Jobs. It's hard not to think about Steve Jobs because his face peers out at us from every magazine and every newsstand and every airport we go through every day. But I've been thinking about what Steve Jobs has really come to mean and come to stand for, and it's really transformational technology. A technology that not only transformed industries, but transformed markets and really transformed lives. And then I think about the roughly $10 trillion of capital that we will need to infuse into the economy over the next 20 years to really transition to a low-carbon economy. And I think, as Rick was talking about paradigm changes earlier, I think one of the greatest paradigm changes we will have to make in the business we do today is think about our deals, our structures, our activities in terms of transformational finance. We will continue to do the bread and butter deals that we do day in and day out, but what are those deals that will really transform the industry? What are the structures that have the potential to transform markets and ultimately transform lives? So I thought I would close by just talking about one particular set of deals that the bank has been working on. But I'm sure if you brought my counterparts up here from Citi or Deutsche Bank or HSBC or any of the other big banks, they would have a deal or two deals like this. Deals that they know will transform parts of the market. And I should note that we're working on a lot of innovative things. I mean, from carbon transactions that improve lighting in cooktops in sub-Saharan Africa. Rick talked about green bonds earlier. We're working on getting green bonds to our high net worth investors so they can participate in the sustainable activities that the World Bank is doing every day. We do a lot in energy finance, energy efficiency finance. We helped to retrofit the Capitol building just down the street. So we're doing a lot of innovative things. But in terms of the transformational things, I wanted to talk about one deal. So our investment banking team, like all of us in the room, spends a lot of time on planes. which means they spend a lot of time looking down on that sea of rooftops that they know that they could take advantage of to do more on. And in 2009, a team of bankers operating in the context of our 10-year, $20 billion initiative asked a simple question. How do we put those roofs to work to create cleaner energy for our local communities? What if we could substantially increase the amount of renewable energy on the grid using those roofs? And they came up with a big idea. Now, distributed generation has been out there. In 2009, it was just starting to take hold, so that's not the big idea. But the big idea is, how do you take distributed generation to scale? Not just to scale, to utility scale. And do it in a way that's replicable over and over again so you can dramatically speed to market solar, distributed solar in local markets. So we needed two things to really bring that vision to reality. We needed, one, a client that shared our vision, and two, we needed a viable way to finance the transaction. Our bankers spent more than a year talking to clients and prospective clients and found the perfect client for this deal, Prologis, one of the largest commercial property owners in the world, but importantly, a client who shared our vision. Now, Prologis had already invested a fair amount in solar PV, even in distributed solar PV. They had about 60 megawatts of solar on roofs across the country. But it was going very slowly because they were doing it one roof at a time. So the idea our bankers had is, can you take 3,000 acres of rooftops, think how many football fields that is, across hundreds of roofs, across 28 states, package them in one project, structure it, install the PV, and then sell that enormous amount of energy, 750 megawatts of energy, back to the local grid. So now the business had a client, they had the roofs, but they still needed to work out the financing. Now, keep in mind that this is a huge deal. This is a $2.6 billion deal. So there are very few financial institutions, ours included, who wanted to keep the whole thing on their books. So the next step in the process was to bring in investors. We needed yet another client who could share our vision on this deal. And that client turned out to be Energy. Not only did they share our vision, they thought the deal was so attractive that they took a majority stake. So suddenly this deal that really couldn't be done, that you really you couldn't structure this type of financing, there was no way that you could package it, there was no way that you would be able to sell it. Suddenly this deal was oversubscribed from an investment perspective. But there was still one element that we needed to reduce the cost of the debt, and that was a loan guarantee from the U.S. Department of Energy. Now, I should hasten to add that this is not the same guarantee program that supported the now very controversial Solyndra deal. And amidst the swirl that occurred, I think we would all admit a legitimate and fairly timely debate has occurred about the role of private and public partnership that I know we will continue, Paul, over the next couple of days, of the government's role as an incubator, of the government's role as a catalyst for private sector investment. But ironically, while that debate continued and continues today, the Prologis deal got closed, and they're installing PV on roofs across the country. But more importantly, it has actually demonstrated to the industry that deals like this can get financed, that there is a ready pool of capital and investors that want to participate in these deals. And so the next deal that we have in the pipeline, a very similar deal to put solar panels on military bases across the country, hundreds of military bases across the country, we're taking that same transformational finance idea to that deal to get it done, and it's going ahead without the loan guarantee and can then be replicated over and over again without the necessity of being reliant on government programs with inconsistent sort of end times. To give you a sense of scale of what we're talking about, in 2011, they're predicting about 700 megawatts of commercial photovoltaic will be installed, about 700. This deal, this one project, is 750 megawatts and can be replicated over and over again. So this is what I was talking about in terms of truly transformational finance. And one kicker, it'll create 10,000 jobs. This story has many elements. It's a story, as I said, about transformational finance. It's a story about job creation. It's a story about the power of public-private partnership and how that can then lead to deals that don't require that type of partnership. It's a story about what we can accomplish when diverse organizations come together and share a similar vision. And frankly, I think it's the type of thing that we should be talking about as we head into the next couple of days, and certainly as we head in to Rio Plus 20, where I know we're going to be focused on all of these issues and more. So I want to thank you very much, and thank Paul again for all of his tremendous work and the work of his organization.
Alexandra, brilliant, and bringing the deal into the conference and flagging that up. Let's recap briefly from our investment players. We hear the need for a huge investment of intellectual capital to get the investment chain correct. From Alexandra, the banking side, it's about transformational deals and finance and the opportunities there. Let me hover for one moment just to fix something before we move to insurance, which is a biographical factoid from me to cover myself as a moderator going forward. I might sound British, Mr. Lacaille, but I'm actually on an Irish birth certificate. And I want to just lodge that for reasons which will become apparent by the end of this session. We don't want to think the Brits are in any way, shape, or form taking over. So there's a couple of Brits, but I'm Irish. Have we got that? Okay, all right. It will make itself transparent towards the end. So we're now moving to insurance, where a tremendous amount of activity within UNEP FI over the past year or so, or even before that, and moving ahead in terms of crafting and launching the UNEP FI principles for sustainable insurance. And in a broader insurance and reinsurance perspective, I'm really delighted to invite to the stage Mr. Anthony Kuczinski, who's the president and CEO of Munich Re America, again, a huge supporter of UNEP FI, and also chairing the Principles for Responsible Investment. I believe we have Wolfgang Engschuber with us. So, Munich Re, Anthony, the stage is yours on insurance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Alexandra, for the plug that I was otherwise going to try to get in. I'd like to start with a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Imagine you want to invest in a wind farm, but you'd be liable for any loss, all losses that could potentially bankrupt you or your family. Would you invest anyway? How would you drive, or better yet, would you drive your car if you didn't have car insurance? How would you manage your health, or how would you pay for your health care costs without health insurance? Would you participate in certain sports where you run the risk not only of physical injury, but economic injury without it? Finally, how much risk would any of us take in just about anything we do, personally, or in business, or in government, if we were faced with the prospect of financial ruin? My fellow speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you to think about that for a few minutes, but the insurance industry influences our decisions in so many ways. Most people don't even realize the extent of which insurance enables, almost like an invisible hand, much of what happens in our society by transferring or mitigating risk. During the next 10 minutes, I'd like to reflect on the vital role of insurance in society, in the economy, and in driving sustainable development. I'd also like to show how important it is for the insurance industry to better understand and manage sustainability in order to enhance the value of risk management and insurance to society. Let me start with the foundation of an insurance company and how it's built. It's built on three principal roles: that of risk manager, that of risk carrier, and we talked about investments, as that of an investor. So from a risk manager's perspective, as the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Insurance, or the transfer of risk to an insurance company, is preceded normally by a series of fundamental risk management steps, including risk identification, risk quantification, and risk prevention. So for example, to provide property insurance, a team of loss control engineers would go out and inspect a workplace to evaluate the building construction, its fire protection features, and even environmental issues. The workers' compensation system in the United States, for example, where some 9 out of 10 workers are protected, tries to promote safer workplaces by providing discounts and rate credits for superior safety and return to work programs. And another example, where we make investments in geospatial informational systems to assess hazards, property and wildfire risks, and help communities to fight fires more effectively. As the risk carrier, what's the role there? When disaster strikes, individuals, households, communities, businesses could or do suffer severe financial losses. Insurance buffers those losses when claims are paid. And you know there are many examples we can talk about, whether it's the recent earthquake in Japan, the recent, not too long ago, hurricanes of Katrina, Rita, Wilma, the World Trade Center disaster. The list goes on and on and on. To this point, the insurance industry pays out about $1 trillion in US dollars in claims every few years. Payments that allows progress to continue and for people to rebuild. I think that's a pretty big wow factor. And then as an investor, insurance premiums have to be managed in such a way that the promise we make to a client is kept in the event of a loss. And insurance policies can run years, if not decades, particularly in the case of life insurance, certain liability policies, and pensions. And in this context, the insurance industry holds more than $20 trillion US dollars in assets under management. And in 2010 alone, in the US, more than $5 trillion US dollars were invested into corporate equities and bonds that provide businesses with capital for research, expansion, and ventures. And we also invest in municipal and federal securities that help fund the building of roads, schools, bridges, and other public projects. Therefore, I can tell you that the insurance plays an important role for safeguarding not only business activities, but our economy. And it also contributes to stability in the capital markets by reinvesting premiums on a long-term basis. So that's my setup for you. Ultimately, however, insurance is a promise for the future. In exchange for a premium, the insurer promises to be there when needed. Unlike most other businesses, we don't really know the cost of our business until years later. With this comprehensive role of insurance, it's no surprise that sustainable thinking is inherent in the insurance business. Our core business, the understanding, management, and coverage of insurance and reinsurance risks, represents a unique selling proposition that we offer our clients for the future and our promise to them. Sustainability issues, such as climate change, environmental degradation, aging populations, emerging healthcare risks, are all becoming increasingly important. Successfully meeting these challenges requires future-oriented solutions. The broad and diverse risk knowledge that is inherent in insurance will be instrumental in enabling people, business, and the economy to protect themselves against these and other long-term risks. The insurance industry is the only economic player that focuses on all types of risk. This means it assumes, in a certain way, a key early warning function for society at large. And risk of change, especially over extended insurance periods, is particularly problematic for insurers and reinsurers. And consequently, it's of utmost importance that insurance companies investigate causes of loss very thoroughly and understand very well potential future losses, and they use that knowledge to help in loss prevention purposes. And this is why the insurance sector supports environmentally friendly thinking, for example, that climate protection efforts offer. Turn to another topic. Holistic health management is an example of loss prevention that takes a comprehensive and long-term approach. Private health insurers are increasingly offering customers free medical examinations, free screenings, health training programs, which we believe create win-win-win situations. 3 ways. They potentially improve the health of our clients, of our customers. It allows for earlier detection, which sometimes could be the difference between life and death, which also takes pressure off the public health care system, and it reduces ultimately the payouts of the insurance companies that they'll have to make. And similar to holistic health management, proper management of environmental, social, and governance issues is part and parcel of holistic risk management and good governance. It stimulates innovative solutions and contributes to environmental, social, and economic stability. To understand ESG issues requires a far-sighted approach and a lot of knowledge, and these are central parts of the business model we offer. Therefore, the insurance industry, or insurance in general, is a very strong lever for sustainable development. I thought I'd take a few minutes just to share with you some very concrete examples of sustainable products and solutions from Munich Re. And as Alexandra mentioned, I'm proud to say that Newsweek recently ranked us as the #1 greenest company in a survey of 500 largest companies in the world. So we're proud of that. So let me start from local to broader global. In our home office, in our U.S. home office campus in New Jersey, Munich Re America has begun construction of a solar energy grid that will substantially reduce our reliance on carbon fuels for electrical consumption in support of our goal to become carbon neutral by 2014. So one thing very close to home for us. The insurance industry, including Munich Re, founded the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. And the purpose of IBHS is to make commercial buildings and homes safer from natural disasters. We believe the IBHS will do for home safety what the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety did for car safety over the years, making buildings safer, stronger, more durable, and more disaster resistant. Another example. We're promoting growth in the use of renewable energy by identifying, assessing, and pointing out the associated risks early on. And then, not just pointing out those risks, but trying to offer innovative insurance solutions for them whenever possible. And again, I can go through examples, but we're limited on time. In the area of medical costs, rising medical costs pose huge problems for local healthcare systems. And in response to some of these societal changes, Munich Re Health, one of the divisions of Munich Re, and the regional health insurer Daman National Health Insurance in Abu Dhabi have devised a new medical service program on behalf of the government. First successes of the program, launched in 2009, illustrate that cooperation between state institutions and private partners show a possible way out of the difficult situation. I would say all of us have a common challenge in climate change and energy security. To facilitate the transition to low-carbon energy, Munich Re Group, together with the Desert Tech Foundation, launched what's called D2i Industrial Initiative, which aims to construct solar thermal power plants in the Sahara Desert that will supply around 15% of Europe's energy needs by 2050. And just to close out with examples, at Munich Re, we also take insurance one step further. Millions of people, primarily in developing countries, lack adequate insurance and lack adequate financial protection. And at the same time, it's precisely these countries that suffer some of the worst natural catastrophes. Through one of our primary insurance companies, we have a cooperation, for example, closely with non-governmental organizations and microfinancing institutions to develop products ranging from health, personal accident, property, and even animal health policies, because those are important to those societies. So I'll stop with the examples for a moment. Ask another question. Where will insurance lead us? The examples illustrate that we're at the forefront of sustainability, navigating global financial markets, confronting the challenges of changing demographics, quantifying the risks of climate change, paving the ways for new technologies and alternative energy sources, and enhancing social inclusion. To leverage this global knowledge of the insurance industry, we participate on a local and global level in many initiatives. And those initiatives are there primarily to support what we believe is a paradigm change in industry, from loss to prevention, from healing to anticipation and management. And we do this through organizations such as the Reinsurance Association of America here in the United States, the Geneva Association and their CRO Forum, and ESG Working Group at an international level. We're now actively shaping global principles for the core business of insurance and the development of the internationally recognized principles for sustainable insurance under the auspices of UNEP FI. The UNEP FI principles for sustainable insurance as a global framework will enable a coherent insurance industry approach to proactively and systematically manage environmental, social, and government risks and opportunities in the insurance business. Let me end with the following. It's only fitting that the UNEP FI principles for sustainable insurance will be launched at Rio Plus 20 conference. This is a landmark contribution and long-term commitment of the global insurance industry in partnership with the United Nations to build a sustainable global economy and advance sustainable development. If I can tie the theme of this conference to I'll call it a phrase we use at Munich Re, if this is the tipping point, then it is not if, but how. I thank you very much.
Tony, again, thank you very much. That's the UNEP FI commissions, the banking, the investment, and the insurance complete. So it gives the sectoral perspective. From an investment side, the need for intellectual capital to make the investment chain work. From banking, transformational finance. From insurance, I think it was Peter Bernstein in Against the Gods, The Remarkable History of Risk, who told us that what differentiated ancient societies from modern ones was the ability to quantify and understand risk. And Tony, when you gave us the role that insurance plays to ensure progress continues, that we are resilient, and that you help communities rebuild, I think you captured the spirit of the late Peter Bernstein's marvelous book. And if you haven't read it, I'm not on commission, but do have a look at it. Let me do this. When we look at this conference, and one of our challenges is that we have three sectors, banking, insurance, investment, where they have their own specific issues, challenges, opportunities, and we look for the common threads that run across the sectors. Now, clearly, the flow of information, disclosure issues, transparency, reporting is the very lifeblood of financial intermediation and the investment processes and insurance. So we're going to close our plenary session with some comments. We've got a video from someone who has certainly well known and who has championed integrated reporting. I know we have with us in the audience Aviva Investors, who recently in New York at the UN launched a call for a global protocol to be backed by other parts of finance and investment to take to governments ahead of Rio Plus 20 for integrated reporting. So the information flow along the chain, that in many ways binds so many of our plenaries and breakouts here. And with that, I would like the AV people to perhaps put the video into place. And I'm delighted that His Royal Highness Prince Charles will address the plenary, and then we'll have a little bit of housekeeping and we'll go to coffee. So the video, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to address your conference and can only hope you will forgive me for not being with you in person. My diary seems to become ever more unmanageable with every passing year, and I'm afraid that it has not been possible to find the time to travel to Washington. It is, however, hugely encouraging that so many of you have been able to do so, and that such a large and eminent group from the financial world has come together for these important discussions. The context in which business operates is subject to fundamental change, and it seems to me that we have reached a crossroads, or indeed a tipping point, for the global economy. The recent and to some extent continuing financial crisis has demonstrated shortcomings in our financial systems and institutions which could pose a threat to the long-term stability of the global economy. There is also growing awareness, but happening far too slowly, that the Earth's natural resources are being consumed at a much faster rate than they are being renewed. In other words, our planet has reached a point of crisis, with the time to act rapidly running out. We are confronting what could be described as a perfect storm, an ever-increasing global population, the demands of which may outstrip the Earth's capacity to sustain it, bringing pollution, climate change, and overconsumption of finite natural resources, coupled with unprecedented levels of financial indebtedness. We are consuming and polluting our children's and grandchildren's inheritance. And to compound the felony, we are also leaving them to meet the costs, to repay the debts incurred as we do so. Yet, little of this is reflected in corporate reporting and in the measurement of the impact of decision-making. To put it another way, corporate reporting and financial decision-making systems have not been developed to cover the more complex and interlinked issues, financial, economic, environmental, and social, that now determine organizations' success and indeed survival. If we are to tackle the challenges of overconsumption of finite natural resources and climate change, it is vital that we have better information about the risks and opportunities that the transition to a sustainable global economy will entail. It seems to me, at the very least, that we need a better understanding of the relationships between energy, water, and food security, as well as climate change, if we are going to grasp accurately the full context in which our global economy operates. At present, we face these challenges with only a fraction of the knowledge needed to assess this risk and therefore make better choices. In particular, we lack knowledge about the true value of nature and are incurring a huge and at present hidden cost and deficit as a result of nature's economic invisibility. While we account for our financial income, expenditure, assets and liabilities with great precision, our greatest asset, the natural capital on which everyone depends, is not accounted for at all. This is why, if I may say so, it is so important for those of you in the financial sector to take on the responsibility for providing the better decision-making systems and information which are so urgently required, and to show that acting for the long term and in the best interests of communities and the environment is the right financial approach, and not just an expensive luxury to be discarded rapidly in times of economic downturn. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I established my Accounting for Sustainability project in 2004 to work with the accounting and financial sectors to address these issues. In other words, the failure to value and measure natural capital, the narrowness and retrospective emphasis of most accounting information, and the disproportionate focus by business and investors on the short term. In 2010, my Accounting for Sustainability project in collaboration with the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative, established the International Integrated Reporting Committee. Its membership represents a powerful cross-section from the corporate, investment, accounting, securities, regulatory, and standard-setting sectors, and includes representatives from the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment Initiative, the International Organization of Securities Commission, and the International Accounting Standards Board. Its objective is to instigate the creation of a global system for integrated reporting to provide the broader information which is so urgently required in a clear, concise, and comparable format. With your support, the International Integrated Reporting Committee can provide an overall framework for better informed decision-making and reporting. But there is, of course, also a huge range of more sector-specific work being undertaken, which would also benefit enormously from your interest and input. My Cambridge Programme for Sustainability Leadership is, for example, working with leaders in the banking sector to identify ways in which banks can collectively stimulate the redirection of investment away from activities that damage natural capital towards those that benefit the environment, while always ensuring attractive returns for investors. The group that CPSL and the banks have established is, in particular, looking at how the banking sector can address the challenges of energy generation and food production in a way which will help facilitate the transition to a sustainable economy. At my urging, CPSL has also brought together leaders from the international insurance industry to form the Climate-Wise initiative. It is a project to analyze the risks and to incorporate the impacts of climate change into insurers' underwriting and investment strategies. Those of you who work in the financial sector have the influence and capacity to help address and mitigate the global risks that we face. And if I may be so bold, it is essential that you use this influence and capacity to do so. Make no mistake, the decisions that investors and businesses take in the next few years will have a cumulative impact on humanity's ability to survive in the long term, in a way and to an extent never experienced or seen previously. If we do not have the right information and systems to make the right decisions, we will effectively lock our children and grandchildren into a very grim future. As the Native American proverb says, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So I can only hope and pray, ladies and gentlemen, that your discussions over the next few days will be an important and practical step along the road towards the more resilient and sustainable global economy so urgently required.
And naturally, we ensure that the thanks of the conference are transmitted to Buckingham Palace. We are obviously closing the opening plenary now. We've had government, we've had intergovernment, we've had banking, insurance, investment, and we've had royal. So we've covered a lot of ground and some wonderful words and wisdom and experience and insight. I would close the plenary session perhaps like this, that in the 20 years of UNEP FI and the Global Roundtables, we've always striven in some ways to bring certain things to our Global Roundtables. Adrenaline, interactivity, and that's all you're going to get going forward. Substance, we occasionally touch on substance. And we want the events to be agenda setting. So I would ask you to enjoy your coffee. The social part of UNEP FI events is very important, and the networking is, for many people, the most valuable element of these conferences. But I would ask you to be back in your seats. Please don't get up yet at, let's say, 11:05. Okay, so we'll start just a little bit after the 11 o'clock. And I'd ask all of you, I think we've had a fabulous plenary session. The next session will be interactive. It will be a roller coaster ride. In Leo Johnson, we've got perhaps one of the best moderators in the world, and a man who occasionally dips into substance. So we can look forward to that. And nor do we shy away from contention. So we'll have a little bit of Occupy Wall Street, and we will reflect on the discussions this morning. Let's close with just some important housekeeping notes from Jessica Boucher, who's a member of the UNEP FI team and also works at WWF in Edinburgh. But let's put our hands together for all of the speakers this morning, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Paul. It'll be really quick, just 4 quick housekeeping issues. Please wear your badges throughout the conference and the conference dinner. Both venues are public buildings, so that would help us out quite a lot. If you have any questions, please ask at the registration desk. The UNEP FI staff can also assist you, and they can be identified by our green ribbons on our badges. The UNEP FI GRT volunteers are wearing light yellow T-shirts and would be happy to help, especially regarding DC-related questions and inquiries. Please note that the conference dinner this evening at the National Building Museum will be business attire. And finally, the amphitheater sessions will be webcast live. So all sessions in here are webcast live, as well as the press conference tomorrow at 12:50. So again, welcome and enjoy the 2011 UNEP FI Global Roundtable.